What's up, everyone? Welcome to the NBA Daily Podcast, your home for useless news about the NBA. So, kicking off today, like I promised yesterday, we're going to be talking about the NBA Draft Lottery, which happened last night. So, for the first time in NBA history, the draft lottery fell exactly as it was predicted to fall. So, first off, you have the Philadelphia 76ers with the first pick in the draft. Then, the LA Lakers, the Boston Celtics, the Phoenix Suns at 4, Minnesota Timberwolves at 5, New Orleans at 6, Denver at 7, Sacramento Kings at 8, Toronto Raptors at 9, Milwaukee Bucks at 10, the Orlando Magic at 11, the Utah Jazz at 12, the Phoenix Suns at 13, and the Chicago Bulls at 14. But that's just some random listings. No one cares about that. I want to start talking about what these teams are looking for. Starting off, of course, with the number one overall pick in the draft, the Philadelphia 76ers. And there's two players that are going to be the top 1 and 2 of this draft, guaranteed. That is Ben Simmons and Brandon Ingram. Ben Simmons is the small forward, power forward combo player who's from LSU. He's a freshman, 240, 6'10". He is amazing at ball handling, dribbling, passing, and rebounding. Great player like that. Not that great of a shooter, from outside especially, and he's not a very good defender. But he's also got the size, and he's definitely got the court vision, and he's often compared to LeBron James, because LeBron James does struggle sometimes with his shot. He can be confident and drill a lot of them, or he can be unconfident and have a very rough season, such as this year from 3. Ben Simmons has a similar problem with his shooting. At times, he'll go into huge droughts of scoring because he cannot seem to have confidence in his own shot and ability. But overall, he's a great player, and he has a great ability to defensive rebound, push the floor, and get an open shot for his teammates or himself. And he's going to be a great player in the NBA. And I believe that that's why he's going to go number 1 overall to the Philadelphia 76ers, despite the fact that they don't really need another power forward type of player. Even though he can't space the floor, he can definitely distribute the ball well, which they do need because they don't have any great point guards on their roster. Now, the second pick of the draft for the LA Lakers, I believe, is going to be Brandon Ingram. He's the other great player. He's a freshman from Duke, small forward. He's 195. He's 6'9". He is an amazing scorer, especially shooting outside. He can dribble it in. He doesn't have great handles, unfortunately. Nothing compared to Ben Simmons. And he's not as great of a rebounder, but he's very defensively sound, especially in the post and on the perimeter, which is very important if you switch on an NBA player. He can be switched onto a guard and actually hold his own decently well, similar to how Willie Cauley-Stein has the long wingspan and ability to cover a lot of ground when a guard is going one-on-one with him. The only issue with Brandon Ingram that I've noticed is the fact that he's very light. 195 for a 6'9" player is very, very light, and he looks it. He looks like a stick, and it's going to be very difficult for him to actually match up well against post players. Players like Kevin Love, Dwight Howard, those kind of players. DeMarcus Cousins would eat him alive if they got switched onto him and had to post him up. Even players like Jay Crowder for the Celtics, who's a small forward, or Gordon Hayward, can almost post him up because they're just so much stronger. So the question is whether or not he can bulk up before the season and actually go up against players like that. Never mind players like LeBron James, who's a small forward that's just massive. Now, after the first 2 picks in the draft, everything else is kind of a crapshoot. No one really knows exactly who's going to go to what team because it's all depending on what you want and what you see the potential in players. Some players like Buddy Hield are predicted to either go 3 to the Celtics, 4 to the Phoenix Suns, 5 to Minnesota, or even 6 to New Orleans, depending on how the draft plays out. Other ones like Dragan Bender, they can go either way because they could be a bust or a potential star. But I'm going to go with my predictions at least, or my hopes for each team. Like for the Celtics, I believe they should draft Dragan Bender, who is a Croatian power forward. He's an international player. He did not play in the NCAA. He's 220, 7 feet tall. He's got a great wingspan. He's very thin. Imagine Kristaps Porzingis, who was drafted last year by the Knicks. Imagine that. Or Nikola Mirotic, who can score from outside, but doesn't necessarily have confidence in the post. He may or may not be able to compete, especially strength-wise, with NBA competition, because he needs to bulk up quite a bit. So if he can bulk up in the offseason and actually grow enough strength to be able to compete against NBA players, then he'll surely be able to play in the NBA at a very high level. But if he continues to be a very thin unathletic player who plays on the outside perimeter, he's going to be very limited in his abilities because he'll get dominated on the defensive end and have a lack of ability on the offensive end to go into the post. He's very skinny, and he needs to fix that if he really wants to be a great player in the NBA, which is why, in my opinion, he could either go 3 and be a success or go 3 and be a massive bust. Now for the Phoenix Suns, I think that they're going to pick probably Jamal Murray, who is a 6'4" point guard shooting guard combo, 205 from Kentucky. He played next to Ulis all season, which obviously shows he can play off ball. But I think with Devin Booker as a shooting guard for the Phoenix Suns, they'll be looking for a point guard to complement him because Devin Booker is obviously a great shooter and needs to get the ball in the right spots. And Jamal Murray is not the best passer from what we've seen, but he is a dynamic scorer and he can definitely space the floor. He shot 50% from 2 and 40% from 3 in his seasons in Kentucky. He's a freshman. And he averaged over 20 points per game. My NBA comparison for him would be a Kevin Martin type of player. But I feel like his ceiling might be somewhere around the likes of James Harden really is his ceiling. Because that distributing ability and also the ability to score is very key to Jamal Murray's game. But he also has quite a bit of defensive liability, which is of course very similar to James Harden. Now for the 5th pick in the draft, Minnesota Timberwolves, I think they might select Buddy Hield. Now this could go either way for Jamal Murray or Buddy Hield because they're both shooting guard players, but I think that the Minnesota Timberwolves will get lucky and get Buddy Hield at the 5th. He's a 215, 6'5" shooting guard from Oklahoma. He's a senior. He played all 4 years at Oklahoma, and he was a great scorer this year. And he also is the main ball handler for the Oklahoma team. He averaged 52% shooting on over 8 threes a game. That was fantastic. 53% from the field, 53% from 3, and 90% from the free throw line. Great shooter all around. But I think his NBA comparison will be more towards CJ McCollum rather than someone like a James Harden or anyone great like that. Mainly because he's undersized. He's 6'5" as a shooting guard, which is pretty small these days. If you think of like Klay Thompson and players like that, they're a little bit taller than that. And he also has a pretty limited wingspan at 6'8.5". He's got a pretty complete game because he works very hard at it, and he has for all 4 years. But one of the main problems with him is the fact that his height and his lack of handling of the ball might limit his ability to get open shots in the NBA. He's also not that quick or strong, so it will really seem like it's going to struggle to actually get open and get good shots, which is why I feel he'll fall to the 5th spot and go to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, for the 6th spot, the New Orleans Pelicans, I think they're going to pick Chris Dunn, 6'4", 220, point guard from Providence. He's a junior, and I think he was great this season, leading his Providence team to a 22-11 season. Very surprising, and 11-7 in the Big East. But he does have limits. He's a great driver. He's got great athleticism, versatility, and potential. He's got a very quick first step to blow by his defenders, and he attacks the basket well. He also leads the NCAA in assists for most of his junior year. But the only issue is that he does have difficulty with turnovers. He averaged 4.1 turnovers per game. And also the major hit on him, he has medical concerns, which is a major wild card. Because if he does get injured at the higher level, that's it for him. It can be very difficult to make a team, especially in the NBA roster, if you get injured during your rookie contract and can't seem to find plays out. In 2013, he had season-ending surgery on his right shoulder, which is what limited his play. And during his first 2 seasons, he only had 29 games where he was able to play due to the injury to his shoulder. That's a very big concern and a red flag for NBA teams because you do not want to waste your 6th pick in the draft on an injury-prone player. But I feel despite that, he has great potential and that the New Orleans Pelicans will pick him. Next up at the number 7 spot, the Denver Nuggets, who I believe will pick Jaylen Brown out of California. He is a shooting guard, small forward combo, 6'6", 225. He's a freshman. He's a bit undersized, but he's a great wing player. He's physical, and he also has a body of a massive NBA player. Great athleticism, strength, quickness, size. You want to talk about someone out-muscling their opponents? That's him. He can body them, but he's also a high-level athlete. Fantastic. But he also doesn't have a very consistent jump shot, and he does not have good ball handling, which is very telltale of the fact that he's dependent on his athleticism. And you do not want players that are too dependent on their athleticism because as that athleticism dies or as it becomes difficult to utilize it against other NBA athletes, he might have difficulty scoring because he can't dribble himself open and he can't find great shots without the ability to use his athleticism. So it's a red flag and it's something to keep concern of, but I still think it's going to be outweighed by the fact that he has great potential and great athleticism. Number 8 in the draft is the Sacramento Kings, who are looking to pick, most likely, Domantas Sabonis, who's a native of Portland, Oregon. He played at Gonzaga. He was actually a sophomore this year. He's 6'10", 240. He's a power forward / center combo. He reminds me a lot of Louis Scola, especially at his hard-working ability, but maybe his lack of actual ability, especially athleticism. He is not very athletic. He's not very quick, similar to Louis Scola, but he runs the floor. He's crafty, as many people realize. He's got great post skills, which is very important because if you're not athletic, you need to have high basketball IQ and post skills in order to actually get open shots. He's good in the pick and roll, but he also has a very limited wingspan, which prevents his defense from actually helping him. He also struggles on the defensive end because in his matchups, he's normally less athletic, less quick, and less strong, and his below average wingspan does him no help. So if he can't defend very well, it's going to be very important to think about whether or not you want to have a player who might be a liability on one end of the floor. Obviously, if he can get it together and play as a very good team defender, that won't really matter. But the Kings have to keep that in mind in order to really think about whether or not they want to draft him. Of course, no player is perfect, and as you can tell, there are weaknesses to everyone in this draft. It's really a two-man draft between Ben Simmons and Brandon Ingram at this point. Also at number 9, the Toronto Raptors are picking, and I think they're going to pick Jacob Coyle, who is a 7'1" center from Utah. Sophomore, he's 240. He is massive. He runs the floor very well as a big man. He gets up and he looks for open layups. He tries to get good angles at the basket, and he normally does. He finishes at the rim very well with soft hands, but he's very, very raw. And if you don't know what I mean by raw, I mean he's unpolished as a player. He does not have very many post skills. He's not very great at scoring on the offensive end when he has to create a shot for himself. And it's important to watch because he might get shut down. If his teammates cannot create open looks for him on an NBA roster, he might get shut down as a player on the offensive end. And if you have someone who's completely shut down on the offensive end, unless someone else is giving them an open look, that's something to make sure you're watching because it's very, very dangerous to have a liability like that. Plus, he can't shoot free throws. And as we all know, Hack-a Dwight, Hack-a Howard, Hack-a Shaq, all of those all happen because a player can't shoot free throws. And if he can't shoot free throws, he may be a liability so bad that he can't play on the floor in the fourth quarter of a close game. That's important to make sure you keep track of. And the final pick for tonight is the Milwaukee Bucks at number 10. Marquise Chris is who I believe they're going to take. He's a 6'10" power forward from Washington. He's a freshman at 235, but he's a 7'1" wingspan and an 8'10" reach. And that was at his U18 tryouts 2 years ago. He's grown even more since then. He can jump. He's athletic, very quick first step, especially as a 6'10" player. He can actually get by his defender on the perimeter a little bit. He's not great at shooting, but he's good enough to get by and he can develop it. He has a good form, just very little confidence in his shot. And he could be a great defender if he utilizes his athleticism instead of just dunking on the rim, but also to defending his player. And I think he can do that as long as he focuses and has a great coach, which he will have on the Milwaukee Bucks with Jason Kidd. Plus, he's long and has a big wingspan, which is what the Bucks are really looking for with their team. Because if you haven't noticed, they're constantly trying to find more long players. So I think he'll fit very well with the Milwaukee Bucks, and I think they should pick him for the NBA draft. But of course, these are all my opinions. If you guys have any opinions on these mock drafts, you should let me know. And put it in the comments. Give me your suggestions for any of the picks. See if you like anyone that I haven't mentioned yet. Also, if you guys like this video, let me know in the comments. Subscribe. Leave a little like. Because if it gets attention and it seems like you guys enjoy it, maybe I'll do a breakdown of 10 through 30 and continue going through what all the teams need and should be looking for in the NBA draft. Because it seems pretty interesting to me. But if you guys don't want it, I'll make sure I don't put any content out that contains it. Let me know what you guys think about this entirely draft-focused episode. And I'll be back with you tomorrow to talk about the games between the Cleveland Cavaliers and Toronto Raptors in Game 1 and OKC versus Golden State Game 2. Thanks very much for listening, and have a great night, everyone.